Hello, world. Welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. At 123.com/joy. Everything that you're going to need for preparation: generators, solar panels, Faraday products. If you want to disappear and protect yourself from the surveillance state, they have an entire line of amazing Faraday products called dark bags. They're always 10% off at the satellite phone store if you go to sat123.com/joy. That is sat123.com/joy. The satellite phone store has supported the Shannon Joy Show for many years. They are amazing partners, and let's help the companies that help keep the lights on here at the Shannon Joy Show. So if you are in the market for any of their products or services, make sure you use that promo code JOY and go to sat123.com/joy. That's sat123.com/joy. I am so proud to be working with Peter Schiff and Schiff Gold in 2026. There is no one that I would trust more to send this audience to in terms of a metals strategy, whether it's your gold and silver physically that you purchase and keep in your home or in a safety deposit box, gold and silver in an IRA, which you can do through Schiff Gold, or even investing in gold mining stocks, which Peter Schiff and his team can also help you with. It is time to get that metals strategy in place. Right now, silver and gold are soaring. Silver is approaching $85 an ounce, while gold is up over $45 an ounce. And people don't see this stopping anytime soon. I know it seems expensive to you, but I don't know that there is a cap to this in the near future. So you can get started now. I want to encourage you guys right now to go to schiffgold.com/joy. That is schiffgold.com/joy. Everything that you need, Peter's analysis, market reports, research reports. You can get plugged into his investment services, physical gold and silver, which we're going to be talking about this month, and also protecting your retirement with a gold or silver IRA. It's all right there at your fingertips on my page, schiffgold.com/joy.
All right, welcome back to the Shannon Joy Show. This is Aaron Day. I am substituting for Shannon. This is the day 2. Welcome back, and we have a great panel today with Patrick Wood, Craig Wenkowitz, and then Courtney Turner will be joining us shortly. We have a short window here, so we're just going to jump right in. Today's topic is going to be what the Epstein files have revealed about technocracy, and I'm just going to jump right in. No big introductions. Patrick, do you want to start?
Well, exactly. We've been talking off air about all the coincidences that have happened along the way. Not coincidences, but you understand what I'm saying. All the nonsense involving certain players. Epstein was one of them for sure. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission, and I expect he was operating on behalf of the Trilateral Commission all of his career, at least since he joined. And you see other people circling around, like people like Larry Summers, for instance. He was instrumental in the beginning. He's a member of the Trilateral Commission. You know, there's too many coincidences that show members of the Trilateral Commission along the way. Somebody would have to be directing the whole thing. My guess is at this point, it was somebody or a group of people, maybe the insiders on the Trilateral Commission. And having said that, I'm puzzled how all of a sudden this big drop of all these papers just showed up. Okay, we know it was being driven by the public and the cries of, release the papers, we want to see what's in them. And then all of a sudden they did. And at this point, when you consider all the flack that President Trump has been giving the United Nations, for instance, he's dissing all of the climate nonsense that we've been dissing for so many years, but he's all of a sudden jettisoning all the talk about climate, the United Nations, all that stuff that was in play for all these years. Then you have the release of these papers. It appears to me that the old globalization at this point is so over that you don't even need to go back to it at all at this point. We're not fighting that anymore. The old globalization is over with the release of these Epstein papers. And at this point, the effect has been to shred anybody's confidence in the government totally at this point. I mean, people are so disgusted with all the nonsense going on, swirling around Epstein, that they say, especially the younger generation, they're just throwing their hands up and saying, you know what? We'll just scrap all the garbage. And let's just go for AI. AI can control us so much better. And even if there's flaws, it can do so much a better job. At least we're not going to have, pedophiles running around within AI itself, right? So this seems to me to be a very opportune time to put the nail in capitalism and our political system all together. That's just my opinion, but it just feels really big to me.
Yeah. Well, let me add to that. It's kind of like this, here's all this bad stuff going on over here, the Epstein files, how things have operated in the past. And it's like, hey, come on over here in this warm pool where we've got everything under control, right? This technocracy, come on in here. It's nice. And I always refer to this, like the crocodile, he sits in the water and waits for the prey to come in. They, a little afraid, they step their foot in the water and they go a little deeper and then bam, strikes. And so that's what I'm afraid of, because what I've seen lately is, we're going to talk a lot about how we got here, but what I see coming out, had a couple people, some families, some friends, some business people, that I deal with and work with and discuss things with. And Fox put something out recently about, and Aaron wrote about this in his book. And a lot of people have talked about this, the seizing of stocks. Nobody holds a stock certificate anymore. And this big thing is starting to get out there on Fox where they're covering this. And they're talking about all your assets can be seized and it's legal and it's okay. And so they're setting the stage for what's coming, right? They're going to take it all. And this is where we're going to come from, I think, today, talking about all this stuff and then into where we're at now, which is tokenization, which I think just completely links, hand in glove with this seizing of assets and moving into tokenization. So again, it's like, hey, all this bad stuff's going over here. I almost think these Epstein files were released on time to do exactly what Patrick was talking about. I'm almost getting to the feeling that this is all intentional. We've been waiting for it. Here it is. And you don't like what you're going to see, and come on over here where it's nice and warm in this technocracy space.
I think that might be the conclusion, but when I look at the Epstein files, I see that it is behind the technocracy. So it's at the same well, I guess it is kind of classic to be the problem and the solution at the same time. But when you look at this, and I've been involved on the crypto side of the debate with Epstein, but there are some people that are claiming that inferring from the email that Peter Thiel was involved in kind of sowing distrust about Bitcoin and trying to kind of engineer that aspect of it. And if you look at on the crypto side, that my interpretation based on, and I've been covering this for 3 years, but my interpretation of this is that they hobbled Bitcoin so that they would have no competition to work on either a CBDC directly, which they did through MIT and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, or to pursue stable coins, which are backdoor CBDCs. And so these are the people that were right there orchestrating all of this. But I think that you're right, that it's nuanced and it's actually hard. And there are a lot of debates for people that have been in crypto for 15 years on this. So are young people getting that aspect of it, or are people just getting the salacious, and grotesque stuff on the sex side, and then just associating that broadly with the capitalist system and not looking at what has actually been engineered underneath?
That's a perfect scenario, actually. That's so ingenious to do it that way. When people are looking at the sex angle, that's really what enrages people, I think, more than anything. They'll never go. They won't look under the covers, so to speak, and they never understand what we're talking about here. But obviously, there was something going on. Even if you remove all the sexual stuff and just ask the question, was Epstein a key player in all of this stuff from the get-go? Yes, he was. Absolutely. His fingers were in everything. And would they have possibly sacrificed Epstein for some purpose? That would be pretty cruel to set one of your own up to be murdered. But on the other hand, has anybody seen pictures of his dead body? Well, is he still alive? I don't know. He's probably dead at this point, but it doesn't matter. For the public, he's dead. For us, you see an operative who was so instrumental on getting all these things done, and all of his work in mathematics, transhumanism, technocracy, finance, financial systems. This is just an overwhelming player at this point. His hands were mixing in everything along the way.
Yep. Yeah. I think that this is the part of this that, so anybody that's involved in a project that Epstein was involved in is trying to figure out a way to spin it. They're trying to figure out a way to downplay it. They're trying to, but what you have brought up, so often people talk about, is Trump playing 5D chess? If anyone is playing 5D chess, Epstein is actually the kind of guy that's actually behind the scenes playing 5D chess. And so people are trying to say, well, he invested in this crypto project, but he was just a passive investor, trying to make money. This guy was a strategic investor. The things that he invested in, he invested in because it was thesis driven and he was trying to push an agenda. This is not, I'm just trying to pool together a fund and see what kind of return I can get because, and again, I'll speak to the crypto side of it, but we now know he was involved in crypto going back to 2011. And he brought in this guy, Brock Pierce, which I'm actually having a lot of people, I'm not going to say any of this on the air, but a lot of people that know Brock Pierce have reached out to me personally with information, which I have to vet, but there's a real disturbing story about this. And everybody can research Brock Pierce on their own. I've done a podcast on this, but Epstein was involved in cryptocurrency from very early on. And I believe in 2013, Larry Summers reached out to Jeffrey Epstein and said, hey, as Mr. Money, what is your take on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin? Right. So you have a situation here where Larry Summers, who was Treasury Secretary and president of Harvard, whatever it was, is referring to Epstein as Mr. Money. So this guy was known as kind of the go-to guy on crypto within power circles going back to 2013. And he has had his hands in every major kind of strategic shift that has happened within crypto. And when I say strategic shift, one is the narrative change in Bitcoin, which started out as peer-to-peer digital cash. Now, whether Bitcoin was always supposed to be kind of a backdoor CBDC, that's still debatable, and there are a lot of theories around that. But to a certain degree, it doesn't matter. There's what it is now and what it became, and we know that Epstein was involved in every major part of the transition that occurred between this digital cash to digital gold narrative, including. Epstein funded the developers that cemented the changes to Bitcoin. He also was an investor in one of the companies called Blockstream that benefits from the hobbling of Bitcoin. He funded all 3 US CBDC pilots, and he looks to have been an investor in at least Circle, which is USDC, now the largest stablecoin, and probably also Tether, which was co-funded by Brock Pierce. So this is not a passive investment. And then beyond that, he was brought in by Larry Summers to advise Gary Gensler before he became the head of the SEC. Why this is important, and one of the things that the reason I wrote my book and started to do what I was doing is to warn people about CBDCs, and a lot of this stemmed from President Biden's executive order that officially authorized the U.S. to pursue a CBDC and also promoted a whole of government crackdown on crypto. Gensler was actually critical in putting that whole thing together. So, I mean, Epstein is materially, strategically involved in the movement and the strategic direction of crypto. Hi, Courtney. How are you? We're live. We're kind
of. Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. We're kind of midway through. We're just talking about the impact of the Epstein files and what it reveals about the technocratic agenda. So we're just kind of going on that. So happy to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard you starting to go through all the funding of all the blockchain, Blockstream, and the cryptocurrency stuff. And I think I won't interrupt you much. I'll just say I think that all of his connections to Santa Fe are very relevant to all of that. That was my theory a while ago, but I think that the files that have come out have corroborated that for sure.
Yep.
Well, one thing I can add is we can't leave out are the big banks too, right? We have emails in here to Mary Erdos, who's the CEO of the asset management side of JP Morgan Chase, with conversations with Jess Staley, who used to be at JP Morgan, then left there. And then we've got connections to Leon Black of Apollo Group, right? Ben Black is now he's the one creating the transactions between, the West and the East, basically the US and China. And we start drawing these connections, and then we can go back to, Ace Greenberg, who was the guy who hired Epstein at Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns got taken out in the 2008 real estate crisis. And then what do we get? Then we roll right into cryptocurrency. So somewhere I think there's some connections here where we can connect, this BCCI, CIA operation, banking operation from the 70s and the 80s. Then we go through the 80s, a lot of changes take place. And then we see Epstein rise up through through Bear Stearns, illegal money laundering throughout. And then, then we transfer into a couple crises, 2001, 2008 crisis, and out comes Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Out comes this little thing. And then now we see it evolving and getting called out. And it just feels to me like it was a test ground, like it was some sort of a trial run, to figure out how does it work? How will people respond to it? How do we integrate it into the system? We know that these banks are spending money on this stuff, right, Aaron? I mean, the banks are spending money on all this. And this is only, just because Bitcoin is dying, and it's coming down in value and so forth. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it might be part of the whole rug pull. You know what I mean? Ultimately, there's a big rug pull and it does go to zero or something like that. And the question is what takes its place? That's what concerns me more than anything is what's coming next. Do we have any signs of like what's going to fill that role? Because we know it's not going away. Is this really the Clarity Act, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my takeaway on this has been that this always ends in a global digital currency that's backed by energy credits. Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's going to take a couple of hoops and a couple of steps to get there. But if you look at how this is being positioned, and of course, having the economy based on energy credits is one of the cornerstones of technocracy. But look at what Elon Musk has been doing. Elon Musk has been very vocal about the fact that, one, he's for universal high income, but he's made all of these statements about the fact that we're not going to need money in the future and that money will be more a representation of energy. He's been putting that out there. And then he's about to launch X payments shortly, which I guess is already some people have access to or whatever. But he's planning on X becoming the place where you go to spend money, to become the platform, the dominant platform for money. So my assumption has been all along, even before the Epstein stuff, is that you're going to have first CBDCs. Then you tokenize all of the real world assets. So everything that you buy and sell will be settled in CBDCs. And then once that's all together on a global platform, you switch having a bunch of different CBDCs to having one and having it backed by some energy credit based scheme. That is but what I've been kind of thinking about and talking about for a few years, but that certainly seems like that's happening actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, before I knew anything about crypto, and I was certainly late to the game in the first place, but before that, I noted that there was a moral hazard when David Rockefeller first started the Trilateral Commission in the first place, because he was the chairman of Chase Bank at that point. That's the big money guy in the room, basically. What he saw at that point, I'm convinced at this point, I've been saying this for years, he saw the end of money. Mathematically, it was a certainty at some point. I think that in his mind, how can I convert all my money, which could be just wiped out and overnight? How could I convert my wealth into resources, not just money? Money's that's the scorekeeper, but how can I safeguard my wealth by getting resources under my control, not money? And I think this has been played out all these years. How do we get the control of the resources, not just the money itself? And you see people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk banding together to form PayPal. PayPal was really intended to be the system that he wanted right now, and it didn't work out, but it was an early start. So these people have been messing with this concept of all these alternative money systems to get assets under control. This is the heartbeat of tokenization at this point. Control over assets, massive assets around the world. And whatever fits and starts there have been along the way, you see the same people always at the center of the whole play. The same people. So you saw David Rockefeller in the 70s and the 80s and even into the 90s, interfacing with all these people. And by the way, Jeffrey Epstein knew David Rockefeller very well because of his membership on the Trilateral Commission, but that wasn't the start of his relationship with Rockefeller. Rockefeller picked him to be part of the Trilateral Commission in the first place because of his interest in money, period. Payment system, payment things, and tokenization. Well, we see today this whole field is morphed into something really big, obviously, and it's in a position now to take over the whole world.
Yep, it is in a position to take over the whole world, and it's the struggle I think that we all have is that a lot of these systems are complex and people don't understand the history. So there's at least the perception that these things are popular. There's the perception that people are buying the rhetoric that the U.S. is going to be the leader in crypto and we're going to lead the world in digital assets, and people don't understand what that means. The talk that I've given, I've kind of rebranded it. We spoke about it once before, but I'm calling it the creature from Epstein's Island. And now that it has even more meaning than I thought, now that we're learning that Adam Back, who's the CEO of Blockstream, which is this company that, has built this second layer on top of Bitcoin, and Brock Pierce and everything else, it's literally true, right? What did you have in 1910? A group of shadowy bankers meeting to basically come up with a new monetary system where they get to print it out of thin air backed by government debt. Well, what do we have now? We've moved towards backdoor CBDCs where we have things like Tether and USDC, which, by the way, this is the opposite of crypto. The whole point of crypto was to not have these third parties. Now we have a digital token that can be programmed and tracked and censored by the government. And what is it backed by? It's still backed by treasuries, except that instead of having a group of banks and we don't know their ownership interest, it's Cantor Fitzgerald. It's actually one guy so far that's the main person that's serving the role of the new Federal Reserve in this digital age, and that's Howard Lutnick, who, as I said on several occasions and did a podcast about, he's been tied to Epstein. He's right in the middle of all of this. And so this is happening in front of our eyes. So we're actually seeing this whole process play out, except we get technocratic tyranny at the end, but we still have the same banker role in the middle.
Yes, exactly. You know, I did a study recently to mimic a study that Sutton and I did in the 70s, trying to identify the influence of big banking in the Trilateral Commission membership. And yes, certainly we saw Citicorp, Chase Bank, and other Chemical Bank, et cetera, big institutions at that time. I recreated that study, just analyzing all the connections in the Trilateral Commission to banking. All of a sudden, I found I was shocked, actually, because the old banks, the old institutional banks like Chase and Citi, et cetera, they've been replaced by central bankers directly now. That this is, I read this as a huge tell. The central banks have now shown themselves, if you will, directly into the membership of the Trilateral Commission. This tells me we're not done with the Fed by a long shot. They just were. They weren't sidelined, if you will, by President Trump when he signed the EO in the first part of his administration. So the central banks are still. They seem to be at the epicenter, if you will, of everything that's going on.
Well, and look at what's happening, right? We have George Soros' right hand was Scott Bessent. You know, his left hand was Stanley Druckenmiller. Okay, Stanley Druckenmiller was the trader who traded the British pound into the ground back in the 80s. Scott Bessent, our Secretary of the Treasury, was the right hand. He was the quant guy that figured it out.
Right.
Kevin Warsh Kevin Warsh is the son-in-law of Ron Lauder. Ron Lauder is a member of the Mega Group, right? Associated with Les Wexner, the Bronfmans, Max Fisher. You can go down this whole list of this group, right? He's been selected to be the next Fed as if it was a big decision. It took 5 months and it was every day it was in the news, right? Who's going to be the next head of the Fed? Who's going to be next head of the Fed? And I don't think there was any decision. I think it was going to be Kevin Warsh right out of the gate because of the connections. Not only that, Kevin Warsh worked for Duquesne Capital, which was Stanley Druckenmiller's private family office. Now he's essentially working for Scott Bessent of the Secretary of the Treasury. And he's going to run the Fed. So this ties exactly with what you're talking about. I mean, this is all one tight little network. Okay. And Kevin Warsh is going to run this transition from the Federal Reserve to Howard Lutnick, who's a Secretary of Commerce, who's sitting right behind Scott Bessent. I mean, it's all the parts and pieces. You can't make this up. And then you add Ben Black. The other day, I was shocked when I saw Leon Black. I mean, this is one of the worst monsters, you know, of the eyes wide shut that you could possibly find. I mean, this guy's a monster. And his son was hand selected by the administration to run operations and negotiations with China. Like, it's all right there in front of our eyes. I mean, it's like, it's if you don't laugh, you'll cry. It's just incredible to look at the stuff right out in front of us. I mean, the point is Kevin Warsh has ties with all the descendants. And I don't know how Soros ties back into this. Have you guys seen anything how Soros ties back into this whole thing? I don't really know. He seems like a limb out there on his own, but you can't, but somehow he connects back to this. I don't know where. I'm sure at some point we'll find that the node where it goes back to. But I mean, Druckenmiller, Kevin Warsh, Scott Bessent, Kevin Warsh, and Lutnick sitting right behind all of them. You know, it's unbelievable.
Well, then there's this group of 30, right, which is something that Warsh is also a part of, which I haven't studied that much. I've only done some, surface research on this, but this seems to be kind of an elite group of bankers and central bankers that kind of meet regularly, like the Bilderberg group, and Warsh is part of that, and Janet Yellen and other central bankers. And so it does certainly seem that these central bankers are critical and coordinated and have been for a long time in all of this. And my opinion is, which is why I'm so passionate about warning people about the Clarity Act, is to me, bringing in Warsh is a signal that either the economy is going to collapse or it's going to be a controlled demolition. Because Warsh's background was, Trump gets positioned as this populist, and yet he brings the guy that literally directly worked on bailing out the banks in 2008. Warsh was responsible for the decision not to bail out Lehman Brothers. He was brought in to architect the bailout of Bear Stearns, and then he architected the even larger bailout of AIG. Why would you bring in what about his background makes him well positioned to be the chair of the Federal Reserve now? And it seems to me like he's the kind of guy you bring in when you're about to bail out the system in a major way that has a significant strategic impact on how money works.
When I've watched markets for, I don't know, 30 plus years, 120,000 hours, I've watched these markets, and all I can say is like a couple headlines and a little bit of follow through, and you could have these markets down 30 to 40% within a couple weeks. I mean, this administration holds all the strings to drop this market 30 to 40% anytime they want, because I see what goes on during the day. I've watched this, back in the 90s, how markets traded, before it went electronic. And then I watch, what happened through the transition when the floors went away, and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And that opens up a whole nother set of animals, with the guy who runs, that's a whole story for another day. The guy who runs the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, right? That's all. He's a globalist, and he ties in with this whole thing as well. But the point is that you watch the transition of this, and then you see these things going out on Fox. We were talking just briefly about this. They're preparing people's minds for a crash, and they're warning them ahead of time. We can take all this stuff, and I think it's going to be like a reverse mortgage. They're essentially we're going to have like some event that occurs. They're going to either, control destruction or just an overnight destruction, however they do it. And then essentially they're going to say, don't worry, we're the government, we're here to help. And then not only that, we're going to take your assets just like the Federal Reserve did, right? They basically quantitative easing, quantitative tightening. They take in all these assets that no one wants. Okay. They're going to take in all your assets and they're going to transition it over to some sort of a digital, tokenized asset, and they're going to give it back to you in the form of a reverse mortgage, right? They've been training people on this reverse mortgage for a long time. They bring on the funds, they bring in all these people. So people know how it works. Here, we'll take in all your assets and we'll bleed this back off to you over your lifetime. What they don't want to see happen, I believe, is this transition from the baby boomers, where there's 80 some $80 trillion worth of equity value sitting in 401ks, to the next generation. They want to intercept that, take that from the baby boomers, get a hold of it, tokenize it, gain these assets so that the younger generation has nothing. And they're basically beholden to the whole system. That's what I think's about to happen. I don't know when, but I can tell, like I watch these markets and they could take these markets apart whenever they're ready.
I don't think they're ready until the Clarity Act passes. So this is why, once that is put in place, because they've been working on building the platforms for tokenization. You have ICE, which owns the New York Stock Exchange. You have all of these companies. I mean, I was working on this blockchain project Ravencoin and T0 with Patrick Byrne, which was working on this all the way back in 2018, 2019. So the technology is already there to do this. So once this regulatory framework is in place, Larry Fink is out there saying everything will be tokenized. It's not going to take long for them to do the upgrade. And so when that happens, then in my opinion, they're in the position to do this, to do the great taking. And I didn't watch. I just saw that it was on. Did anybody actually see the Fox News discussion of the great taking? I saw a tweet about it, but I didn't see the actual whatever was on Fox News. But it seems like they're priming people for this idea that you could lose all of your assets, which is true. This is, the changes that have happened in all 50 states through the Uniform Commercial Code that, just to explain it really briefly, when, you may think if you have all of your retirement funds at a particular broker, that if that broker goes bankrupt, that you'll just, you own those investment instruments and you can just have them moved over to another broker. And in fact, that's not the case. It will go to the secured creditors of the broker first, which in most cases is the 4 largest banks in the US. So you will actually lose a percentage or all of the investment portfolio itself. This is a horrifying thing that's actually happened, but almost no one knows about it. And now it's apparently being talked about on Fox News.
Yep. Doesn't it feel a little bit? I know you've done a lot of work on these click wrap agreements, Aaron. Doesn't it feel a lot like that? Like it's a parallel track where, you know, you essentially sign away all your rights and you don't even know you've signed them all away. Right. And they're almost laughing at us when they put this on Fox. Doesn't it almost feel like they're like, look, I mean, we're almost laughing at you. We're telling you we're going to take all your stuff. You know, it goes back to the World Economic Forum statement. You'll have nothing and you'll be happy. I mean, it's literally right in our face. It's right in our face.
I would tag along to that. So I'll just read you this very short paragraph. So the Santa Fe Institute did a whole series on cryptocurrencies and complex systems. And here's a follow-up to one of their series. They say, explore the intersections of complex systems and tokenized systems in this comprehensive lecture from Santa Fe Institute. Delve into the AI DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations, and the concept of blockchains as life form. Discover how the new blockchains democratize access to AI data and algorithms, and learn about applying evolutionary algorithm best practices to token design. Examine the potential of repurposing agent-based systems for simulation in token design loops. Gain insights into how complex systems theory and tools can benefit the blockchain world while understanding how blockchain technology presents relevant applied problems for complex systems research. The title of the series was Collective Crypto, Exploring the Role of Collective Effects in Crypto Network and Token Design. And this was 2019, so it wasn't that long ago. But I think, you know, I wrote that article on that patent, and I think that is where it's heading. Obviously, there are many steps first. And I do think this great taking, I actually had Don Grande on to talk about that the Uniform Commercial Code. It's horrifying because already most people don't own their assets. Like there's, you know, if they can request the actual statement from their banks and then it's kind of, you know, like having a land patent type of a similar kind of a situation, but most people don't. And most banks will dissuade people from requesting it because then they can't trade quickly. Like they have to actually get that title back from the person before they could, you know, make any kind of transactions. So most banks will not encourage you to do so. So you could technically do that. So right now you can do that. But I think this is where it's really heading, where we're all in a cybernetic system. Once people have traded in their assets, I think they'll create some sort of a crisis where people will be incentivized to take tokens as a, you know, trade-off. And once they do that, the free will, I think, is done at that point because they would have complete control. And I think that that's what they were really studying with Santa Fe. So, and I think this plan like way precedes Epstein actually, because Robert Maxwell invested in Santa Fe Institute back in the 90s before Epstein did. And his daughter, Christine, was on the board. So.
Can we rewind a little bit to our discussion on Kevin Warsh?
Sure.
And his role in the Group of 30 over the years? Did we talk about that much?
Not much. I'd love to go deeper on that.
Well, exactly, because the Group of 30, it was started in 1978, I think it was. It's the most influential people in the world versus economic and monetary policy. And they've been, they've had their own parallel system, if you will, their discussions off to the side on mainstream policy, monetary policy. We're talking about monetary policy here when we talk about crypto. Well, the membership, and Warsh is a member of, has been for several years, a member of this Group of 30. These are a bunch of gosh, I don't know exactly how to explain them. Heads of central banks. Paul Volcker was a member of the Trilateral Commission, one of the chairmen of the early chairmen of the Group of 30. You had, let's see, another one. Mark Carney was a member, and also he's a member today, and he was also the head, a chairman of the group of 30. And other members of the Trilateral Commission have been involved in this group as well. And now today, you see the current members. You see people like Augustine Carstens, for instance, the head of the Bank for International Settlements. Niall Ferguson. No comment. I'm just looking down the list here. Sergei Guriev, Dean of London Business School. Let's see, and one more, maybe the third. There's always a rolling 30, always. Let's see. Andres Velasco, Dean of the School of Public Policy, London School of Economics. Then there's Kevin Warsh, of course, from the Hoover Institution. By the way, Hoover Institution is where Tony Sutton worked once upon a time until they kicked him out. So this group has been very influential over the years, and I don't know exactly what their role is in this, but they were a very powerful group of people. They created public policy as they went along. Maybe just winged it. I don't know, but it worked out in actual reality. So I don't know. When you consider how Kevin Warsh's role in the 2008 plus meltdown, this guy was a snake all the way. And like you said, absolutely, this guy is he's a technocrat of the class who saves whole countries. Like when Greece melted down and Italy melted down in the 2008, 9, or maybe it was 10, when the EU sent in members of the Trilateral Commission as unappointed premiers of those countries. Mario Monti was one in Italy, and Georgios Papadamos, I think, was something like that. He was a guy in Greece. He came in to save the country from economic meltdown. This seems to me, this is what's happening right now, with Warsh being given the reins of the Fed.
Well, and we've seen things exactly like that, Patrick. Before the 2008 real estate crisis, we saw Hank Paulson paraded in from Goldman Sachs, given a unbelievable parachute out of Goldman Sachs into the Secretary of the Treasury. And I said, when I watched him walking into that building, the day it was announced and they shuffled him over in the limousine and everything else, I'm like, something's coming. You know what I mean? Because you just don't move a guy like that overnight. You know what I mean? And you had jokers before him, right? You had Snow before him and a couple other people who had no power. And this guy obviously was connected. I mean, this guy was connected to the whole scene, and again, we could go through this group of 30 and create a show on every one of these characters. You know what I mean? You could go Gita Gopinath, Niall, you mentioned Niall Ferguson, Mohammed El Arian, Andrew Bailey, you could go through every one of these. I think the point is, you go back to the IMF, the World Bank, Andrzej Bunga, I think is his name. Yeah. The World Bank, I don't know how much you've done with that, Patrick, but the World Bank and the IMF, I mean, you could create laundry lists just coming out of there. You know what I mean? It is incredible. Kristalina Georgieva is currently running the IMF. Sanjay Bunga, I think, is running the World Bank. I mean, you could do, we could go on for hours on that. But the big thing here is it's a history. I'm sure you remember the name Jean-Claude Trichet, you know what I mean, who ran the European Central Bank. And now he's essentially running this group of 30. He is the, what is his role? I forget what his role in is now, but yeah, I think you're right. This is Kevin Warsh seems to be in there for a purpose. If you look at his background, it seems like they're setting him up. And we need to watch this closely. We really need to watch this closely because, there's definitely something brewing. You know what I mean? There's a pot of jambalaya and it's definitely cooking, and they've got all the ingredients in there. And it's going to, I'd say this heats up late this summer, probably when the Clarity Act. I think they put a target date, right, Aaron, of they want to have this in terms.
Yeah, they want to have it done by the spring. And I mean, you know, I don't have a lot of confidence that we can stop it, although it may be, we might be able to stop it in the House. I would hope that the association with, see, the bill's being presented as a crypto bill. It's not being presented as this is how we're going to tokenize and control all of your assets bill, which is hard to actually cut through because there's a lot of noise here. But if people are going to think about it as a crypto bill, then associate the fact that, you know, the main player promoting this on the crypto side is Brian Armstrong and Coinbase, which we now know Epstein was an early investor, and that now we should be able to cast a lot of doubt over these stable coins with Lutnick as well and Brock Pierce. I mean, you know, look, I understand that Genius and Clarity were popular during the election process, right? Coming out of July of 2024, because crypto was going up. People were making money. People were excited about it. It was something that, you know, politicians wanted to be associated with because it was a bubble that was forming. But with Bitcoin having crashed almost 50%, and now all of these other associations, I don't understand where there's the political capital now, because I don't think that, you know, a particular politician, I don't think they have a groundswell of support, organic support from their constituents. So I actually think that the faster the Clarity Act happens, the faster the controlled demolition happens. But anything that could kind of muck that up buys us more time, which is what I think we need more than anything else, because this is going so fast. This technocracy is going so fast. It's really hard to keep up on.
Well, at some point, Aaron, we should definitely do something on the connection here between the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, and the connection between these with the Clarity Act, because we believe that SEC and FINRA and all these other things provide protections, but they could be nesting things in the CFTC, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, that no one's even going to be policing at all. You know what I mean? And it's going to open the gates for this theft. You know what I mean? Because they're clearly jockeying for position here. And we see this revolving door of hundreds of people coming in and out of the CFTC, going out into the crypto space, back into the CFTC. So there's clearly stuff going on here, and it's hard to sort it all out. But I think we can get a good big picture of what's going on. I think there's a story there between SEC, CFTC, and all, and this market structure bill, you know, the Clarity Act.
Well, before I published the article on Epstein and his ties to all of this, that I wasn't even working on that article. I actually wrote that real quick just based on the circumstances. But I have submitted to Brownstone a 12,000 word article on Genius, Clarity, but on top of that, it's the history of financial regulation. And a lot, Craig, to your point, of a lot of the ideas that you're talking about, because it turns out the SEC, for instance, isn't providing protection for investors. It's making sure that the ruling class is are the only people that can actually invest in these startups. So we talk a lot about, you know, are these companies created out of the CIA? You know, and people like to say that, you know, these companies weren't created in garages. I started an internet company, just one guy and a couple of other people. I don't think that's how it works, but they control the capital structure, and they can come in and hijack these projects. So once you're dealing with venture capital and private equity, that's its own world, regulated world, where shadowy figures like Epstein control how all of the information works and how all of the money flows. That's how they capture these projects. And so they're trying to say that the Clarity Act is going to protect investors. What it actually does is it adds real-time surveillance for all crypto transactions, and in the future, read that to be all tokenized assets, real-time transactions where they can reconstruct the trade, with all of that information being shared not only with multiple departments within the federal government. That information is also shared with foreign central banks, which I thought was the most bizarre element of this bill. But of course, it's not that surprising from a technocracy perspective, because this is a global situation. So they're actually structuring this thing to be able to track and share information on how everything is traded globally with central banks. That should be if there aren't any alarm bells going off on that, I don't know what would set off alarm bells.
Yep.
And I think it will be through smart contracts, and they mention that here. They say crypto networks can each be thought of as their own enclosed economy with their own unique incentive systems, so the cybernetic system, governance mechanisms, and monetary policies. Crypto tokens are a special kind of virtual currency tokens that reside on their own blockchains and represent an asset or a utility. I mean, they're saying it all right here. Such crypto tokens often serve the transaction units on the blockchain that are created using standard templates like that of Ethereum network that allows the user to create his or her own tokens. Such blockchains work on the concept of smart contracts or decentralized applications where the programmable, they're saying it's programmable, self-executing code is used to process and manage the various transactions occurring on the blockchain.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
This
now
is
that introduces Oracle, right?
complexity sound.
Introduces Oracle into the whole thing, right, Aaron?
Yep. Introduces Oracle into the whole thing, and this is what people don't. This is part of what I had to write about in the article, because if people think that Schoolhouse Rock's description of how a bill is made is how it actually works, and you can prove that that's not how it works, and you have to do that by looking at, okay, well, what financial regulation has been put in place, and then what happened to it over time, and so one of the things I'm alarmed about is that we're putting in place all of this surveillance and there is no emergency. Usually you get the Patriot Act or the CARES Act or something when something happens. We're putting in more onerous, bigger surveillance bills, and there's no present emergency. I don't even know what to make of that. That's kind of unprecedented. So we don't even need the problem to put in these things. I don't know what we do with that. I don't know if that's just a function of better propaganda, but that's essentially where we are.
But I think that's a key word, Aaron, propaganda, because if you look at TikTok, just got put under the control of Larry Ellison, and they acquired Paramount, right? And this Warner Brothers thing was Netflix, Paramount. I think the propaganda is a big part of this, Aaron, and I think it's all been put under the umbrella of Oracle, the database, the TikTok, the distribution, X platform, Elon Musk. Now that's separate, but did you see? That's a whole other story. Did you see what just happened with this morning? There was a report out about Anthropic and XAI and these swarming drones. Did you see that this morning? I mean,
No.
It's
No.
Did you see it, Patrick? You look like you were nodding your head.
Not yet. No, not yet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oracle set up the infrastructure for the social credit system in China. So they had, that was Oracle. And it was back in like the 90s. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, Oracle has its fingers in every database in the world at this point.
Yeah.
It really does.
And they have a feedback loop with Meta. So like when you're talking about TikTok, remember that whole narrative of, again, talk about propaganda. Remember how Zuckerberg was claiming that, bad China, that's why we have to take control of TikTok. But meanwhile, they have a feedback loop where Meta gets they collect all the data from Oracle. Oracle is the data collector infrastructure, and then Meta receives that, and it's a feedback loop back and forth. So, I mean, they were totally working together, and he was helping with the propaganda. But yeah, that had nothing to do with big bad China.
Yeah. You mean Zuck wasn't a dropout that just had a great idea? Okay. But I really believe that if we're going to have some sort of a financial situation that goes back to, Kevin Warsh, goes back to Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Tether, all these things, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to walk people off a cliff, and you're going to have to do that with propaganda. And that's why I think this Paramount Warner Brothers thing's being built on the side with XAI, with, that's a separate deal. But with the TikTok underneath the umbrella of Oracle, I really think that's going to be part of the whole deal. Is you're going to have to deep fake people. You're going to have to do whatever it takes, right? They're prepared to do whatever it takes to walk people off the cliff and accept the fact that here you're now on universal basic income. You're on the tokenization chain. That's what, because it's not, I mean, how else do you diffuse, First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third, all these different amendment rights other than just brainwashing people? I think that's a big part of stealing everything.
Yeah,
That's a good,
yeah, I think the propaganda is a huge part of it. I would say that you said you don't really need the problem, and that's very concerning. But I think that part of, the whole COVID, pandemic, I think that did so much to break people down that I think that in a lot of ways people are still, recovering from that. And that propaganda was so impactful that they don't think they need the book Klaus Schwab wrote was COVID-19 and the Great Reset, right? And it was all about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I think they're just in that rollout phase. They don't think they need another crisis, but I think they're prepared to execute one if things don't go according to their plans. I think that's kind of, typically they have like several war game scenarios, and they'll kind of test the waters and see how the public is responding, and then, deploy whichever they think is going to be most necessary at the time. But I think right now they're pretty hubristic. They don't think they need it.
I wonder if the privately, I'm saying it publicly, but I'll just say I'm worried about it privately. That the big explosion that will come possibly in the very near future is the exploding of the whole debt-based nonsense, all the currencies of the world, basically driving the bankruptcy of nations, even the United States. And everybody in the know understands you can't go on forever inflating a currency, and it's at the end of its mathematical certainty. I don't know when that can happen. I'm not a math whiz to figure it out, but this seems to me somebody has this in their mind, like Warsh and Besant, that we're going to be terminal at some point. That would be the most devastating thing, way beyond even 9/11 in America, and it would require every bit of surveillance that they can muster at that point to keep the population in control.
When I have a philosophy on that, like everybody talks about, I've watched for 30 years the beating down of the US dollar, and it deserves it, right? I'm not here to take it away from it, but there's also other major currency pairs out there, the British pound, the Australian dollar, the Japanese yen, all these other currencies, and they're just as bad as ours or worse, And so I have this feeling that the dollar could fail on the upside. It's going to fail. It's just, does it fail on the downside or the upside? If it fails on the upside, that creates this illusion that the U.S. wins, right? That we are the defense, king of the world, that we have that Howard Lutnick and his tether are the solution. Scott Bessent's the solution. Kevin Warsh is the solution. Why are all these people? We know that the U.S. leads central bank policy. We've watched this through 2008. We've watched the whole thing. They all act in coordination because they're all part of this group of 30, If the dollar fails on the upside, that's going to cause more devastation for the third world countries and these other countries that you need to pile on than if the dollar goes down, right? We know what happens if the dollar goes down. I really feel, and again, I use these things called harmonics, and we're down at a level 96.80 in this dollar. If this 96.80 and the dollar index holds, and we start climbing through 100 in these psychological levels, you're going to see things like the British pound fall apart. Today, we just saw the UK had worse unemployment than they had during COVID. They've now exceeded their unemployment rate. So what does that do? It's creating division between the people and the government. You know what I mean? And you're creating this hostility, and they need to quell it, right? So how are they going to quell it? Well, follow the U.S. Kevin Warsh, Scott Bessent, they got the solution. I mean, Scott Bessent is a hitman, right? He's an economic hitman. That's really what he is. And so these guys know what they're doing. They know how to run this. And we've been so brainwashed. I think even the whole financial community will be turned upside down If the dollar starts to fail on the upside, they will have no idea what's going on. They will not get it. They'll be like, I don't even have a clue what's going on. And we'll see so much controversy in the financial news. They're going to be able to pull off whatever they want because it'll be so disorganized, the thought process that goes with a dollar failing on the upside. Now, I know that's an outlying thought, but I see the energy building across all these major currency pairs, and I just don't think it's going to fail the way we think it's. I think something out of the ordinary is going to happen here, and these are the guys to orchestrate it. I know, Aaron. Aaron and I know we've wanted to have. I can tell we need to have this debate sometime over this dollar because we both know it's going to fail. It's just I don't know if we both agree that it's going to fail on the upside.
Well, I've never seen a global reserve currency fail on the upside. It would definitely be it would be a black swan for currency. But we have $9.6 trillion worth of debt we have to refinance, which, by the way, I think is one of the other reasons they're putting Warsh in is to lower interest rates, because this is debt stemming from COVID that we now have to refinance. So this is a massive wall that we're facing. And, I feel like that is part of why Warsh is being brought in. And if you actually look at the timing on this, it seems like it's pretty soon. But didn't they just revise our job numbers downward? Didn't we revise 1 million jobs or something for, things are not going great here either.
Yep.
And I think we have to, one of the things that's different is that, we have China now, right? I mean, so China is crushing us on all of these technology categories and everything else. And so I don't know, maybe we fell on the upside. I don't know. I don't even know what that looks like. We'll have to talk about that more, but
yeah.
In any event, we know that, when I gave my talk, I was trying to explain to people that, in 2008, we actually had unity with respect to, Occupy Wall Street. And even though that was a manufactured movement, and the Tea Party, the right and the left were unified in their, opposition to the banks. And now here we are, bringing back the exact people that created that energy that both sides were against to orchestrate another bailout. And so we've made no progress. The people have made no progress. Bitcoin was hijacked. And so what we got out of it now is people excited about this vague concept of cryptocurrencies, but then now not even knowing how to, categorize these things properly. So now they're actually supporting backdoor CBDCs as somehow being a crypto invention. And so we're in a pretty bad place in terms of how we're going to respond. And, I always say, you're deep in it when the chair of the Federal Reserve is on 60 Minutes with a calm voice trying to tell everybody everything's going to be okay. That's the moment you realize it's already passed. So anyway, that's my view on that.
It's going to be interesting. To your point, Kevin, one way that the dollar can blow up on the upside is if people like a Secretary of Commerce Lutnick can get the 680 plus million acres of land owned by the United States free and clear, get all of that tokenized, that would be a huge asset to bring into the crypto space as tokenized assets.
Yep.
That would change everything in the United States for sure.
Patrick?
He's bragged on this on national TV last year.
Yep.
It's exactly what he said I want to do. I want to get all these assets in token form. We can make money off of that somehow.
And look what happened just last week, we saw Putin caving, saying, yeah, we're done with the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. He said, yeah, we're willing to do things in the dollar. So BRICS was held up for 3 or 4 years as being this, counter to the dollar, right? Counter to these other fiat currencies, gold-based, silver-based, asset-based. And they threw in the towel. I mean, I think they've completely thrown in the towel now on BRICS. And then you look at the stable coin based denominated in dollars, like you said, if you can get the assets going, the world's awash in debt. I mean, there is so much debt out there in the system, and the world needs war. I mean, we see the Munich Security Conference just going on this past week, and it's just chaos. I mean, you could spend hours on that. Like, the complete fallout of, von der Leyen and Kaya Kallas and all these characters. And then they obviously had Ocasio-Cortez over there and Rubio, which is interesting. Last year it was Vance. This year it was Rubio. I think there's a whole story behind that too, who they sent to be the main spokesperson there.
Is behind Rubio. So yeah. I have a question though before we move on. Because you brought up the assets and the real estate, and part of the Great Trust project in Gaza, they're actually doing that with the real estate. They're giving them, I think it's like the equivalent of $5,000 to give up their real estate, and then it's becoming tokenized. And I'm wondering if you think that that's like a blueprint, a test bed for what they might do here.
Well, look who's running it. Witkoff, Kushner, I mean, it's, and yeah, I think it is. And I think they're going to do it in Ukraine too. That's the same thing. They're negotiating the Ukraine thing. I think it's a commonality. I don't think this is a separate. I don't think you can treat those things separate.
I don't think so either. But yeah, I was curious if your thoughts on that. It seems like that's where they're headed.
Well, there does need to be a deep dive into this and into Cantor Fitzgerald and to lay out all of this, because, I am elated about the fact that people are that Lutnick is now a national news story, which he was last week. And, the Epstein part is not even necessarily the worst part of his story. And I think that it's not a surprise that the U.S. has now reached its lowest rating, not in a good way, on the corruption index, because of what's going on here. So, I mean, maybe I'll write something, or we can all write something, but lay out what Lutnick is actually doing, because it is the creature from Epstein Island. It's transforming the system that we have, but it's the same general concept, which is that you have a small group of people that control everything. It's the only difference is that this time it involves digital surveillance. What we get out of it is technocracy, and what they get out of it is a new configuration of who essentially owns the Federal Reserve. And of course, enough people haven't read The Creature from Jekyll Island to necessarily know what all that means, but it is playing out in real time, and it's so blatant that it's just a matter of simplifying and explaining it so that the average person can understand it. Because I think if they did understand it, people understood outrage about Nancy Pelosi's insider trading, but this is so much worse. It's just that it's complex. So if we can actually boil that down, maybe people will be as outraged as they should be about what's happening right in front of them.
Yeah.
It's way worse than the inside. I mean, not that that's good. I mean, that's incredibly corrupt, but I think you're right that it's so much more simple. So people understand it. It's very tangible for them, and they don't have an understanding of how this all works together and how it impacts them.
We can't let Fox get to him before we do, because Fox will have him so brainwashed into saying, right? It's okay. They're just going to take all your assets. No big deal. Don't worry about it. It's all okay.
It's a reverse mortgage for your 401k.
Exactly. They're going to sell them like a trade for their 401k into some sort of like.
They'll drag out Tom Selleck and the Fonz again, for the.
Yeah. I'm sure they'll get some sort of kickback for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very likely. Yeah, that would be good to put together. But I do think if this isn't stopped, I think that where they're going is the tokenization through us, and we become part of the cogs in the cybernetic wheel.
Yep.
It's not good.
Now, did you guys see this? I haven't validated if it's actually true or not, but Kim.com made a post claiming that Palantir was hacked. And
I saw something really quickly about that. I didn't get to read the whole thing in detail, but I don't know if that's true.
It didn't look real to me, Aaron, but maybe it is. But it didn't. My first blush when I read that, it didn't look real to me.
Me too.
It didn't look real, but Kim.com is usually at the center of things like this. I mean, he's been at the center of, WikiLeaks things and everything else. He's a pretty,
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I don't always feel like that what Kim.com puts out is legit. So I know, I know Kim has an understanding of what's going on, but I don't know that what's being relayed is accurate. That would be crazy though.
Well, I'm pulling it up here. So again, and I'm gonna caution by saying this is not validated. So but at the same time, what he's saying is it was hacked. An AI agent was used to gain super access, and it's suggesting that Peter Thiel and Alex Karp commit mass surveillance of world leaders and titans of industry on a massive scale, including Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, backdoored the devices, cars, and jets of world leaders, creating nuclear and bioweapons capabilities for Ukraine, working closely with the CIA to defeat Russia, responsible for majority of Palestinian deaths in Gaza, is an arm of the CIA, and all data from international clients is copied into a CIA spy cloud. I mean, certainly at this point, that seems probable. I mean,
I don't think we disagree with those things. Yeah.
Didn't we already know that stuff?
Yeah.
From other sources? I mean, this is not a new revelation.
Right.
I guess it's not new revelation. Palantir's stock has been hammered lately, and I wonder. And as I talk to people, I will say this as we all know, we've been talking about J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and people like Curtis Yarvin, but I think the word is actually getting out. The J.D. Vance may not end up being the front runner at this point. I'm hearing a lot of people kind of have really soured on J.D. Vance. That doesn't mean that, we're out of the woods, but I mean, clearly from a technocracy perspective, if there was ever a fast track,
too. I think Rubio is just as concerning, and they're definitely backing him. So I thought it was going to be a showdown, but I do hear a lot of people who are very concerned about Vance now because that has gotten out. But less people know about Rubio, and a lot more like Republicans have a more positive view of Rubio. I keep hearing, "Oh, I'm not going to vote for Vance. Rubio's great." So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have a false choice again. That's true.
Right.
I just don't know to the extent to which Peter Thiel controls Rubio like he does J.D. Vance.
Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison has financially backed Rubio. And it's less of a mentorship. It's more of a solid financial backing. And he is definitely behind Rubio.
Wow.
Solidly. Yeah. So he's put a lot of money into Rubio. So that's yeah. And that's why I thought it would be like a technocratic showdown between Thiel and Ellison. Like, oh, they're going to duke it out again because they're always, even though they don't believe in competition, the two of them are always in competition. Ellison tried to buy out Palantir back in 2016.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, he said no. But they do work together. I mean, even though they, certainly, I think they, to say they're megalomaniacs might not be, and it might be an understatement. I don't know. But they definitely do work together when it serves them. There's a lot of symbiosis, and because they have government contracts that are simpatico. So.
Well, it's interesting to see if more people are waking up to Palantir. Hopefully that trend continues. But I find it entertaining to watch Elon Musk and Reid Hoffman fight each other, as if we're supposed to pick sides as to who was mentioned less in the Epstein files. Like that's the new standard, right? I haven't even understand. Musk is just blatantly lying. He's trying to act like that essentially Epstein was harassing him to go to the island. I'm like, did you not read the emails? This is the way he has success with this because he has all of these other accounts amplifying this. It's very bizarre to me to watch all of this going on, to see now, but of course I think this is one of the ways technocracy fails is when the megalomaniacs fight each other, and that's actually probably our best hope is their own divide and conquer.
I think, I keep saying that. I think that is our hope. But I think it's interesting, too, with Musk, how he keeps harping on Bannon. And I wonder if that's I'm not saying that Bannon should in any way be exonerated. That's not, don't mistake me. But I think that all of the focus, if Elon is trying to prop up that narrative, it makes me think that there's something behind that. And I wonder if it's a deflection kind of a tactic, like, oh, look over here, I'm innocent, but look at him. I don't know. But I do think it's interesting that he's been, it's almost like obsessively trying to, condemn Bannon. So not sure if that's a.
Yeah, no, that's true. And then even Roger Stone is out there saying, "Oh, Elon Musk was right." There does seem to be more factions on sides of this. And again, Bannon. I've said this before, and I'm continuing to try to collect some information. I think the connection between Bannon and Pierce needs to be understood. I'm hearing more things privately about Pierce speaking at these conferences, and man, I'll tell you, you line all that up, and it's he was kind of positioning himself to become like an Epstein is the way that I read this. And just to say how bizarre this is, not to go too far off on this, but there's an email from Brock Pierce to Jeffrey Epstein saying, sure thing, I live in the first Masonic temple, built in the New World.
Yeah.
I mean, just this stuff gets more and more and more bizarre, and I obviously we'll continue to unpack this. Well, we've got about 12 minutes left. Are there any other? We've talked a lot about the financial crypto side. Are there any other areas that we want to talk about that have been revealed?
I want to say two things. So when you said that Brock it looks like he's positioning himself to be like a future Epstein. Yeah. I actually think it might be kind of the reverse. Because he was like a child actor with, all sorts of scandals behind him. I feel like they were propping him up to be the front person. Even with the company that Bannon ended up taking over, I don't think he was really in a position to be, at the helm of everything. But I think he was the front man to do it and kind of being groomed to be a fixer, kind of like Epstein. That's what it looks like to me. But the one thing I did want to address, because we touched on it a little bit, but Craig, you were talking about how Putin it looks like he's giving up on the BRICS. Do you think that is genuine, or do you think that that's some sort of a play? Because a lot of the whole BRICS is about the multipolarity, which is a vehicle for the technocracy, global technocracy. And it's also, it creates the dialectic to, advance the synthesis. So I'm wondering, do you have thoughts on what might be behind that and where that's going?
Well, I think there's different layers, right? There's a layer for the consumption, that can be distributed to people. Then there's a layer above that, for the financial industry. And then there's a layer above that, the governmental financial industry. And so you got these different layers. And I think, that, to me, that doesn't play to the general public because you don't hear that much about BRICS. For a while, it was kind of in the, you'd hear a little, you'd get storylines with it. I think that's more for the financial industry at this point to sort of play games with their minds and confuse them. Again, this goes back to why I think the dollar could fail on the upside, because I think I don't want to get into that too much because it's a long, we'd have to go into 5 or 6 different components of why that could be the case. But the big thing for me is that it could be, right? We don't know what it means. All I know is it was a headline. It was promoted at the newswire level, right? So when I watch my newswires versus watching the TV, it was coming through over and over and over again talking about this. So they're clearly targeting a segment of the market. I don't know whether it's true or whether it's not true, but what I can say is there's definitely an effort to let the world know that part of that stratosphere of the thing know that BRICS is done. Because if you think about it, China has 2 currencies. Nobody ever wanted to dominate in the renminbi or the yuan. There's just no faith in it, no trust. Then you look at India. India is a power player. You can see them making a lot of moves lately, right? But then you look at South America, the whole Brazil component of that. Lula has been rendered pretty weak now that Venezuela has been taken over. So that whole component is much weaker than what it once was. South Africa has its own issues, So when you really break this thing apart, there's not much in the BRICS anymore. And so I think they have to sort of admit defeat at that level. And do they come back and revitalize it, bring it back as something new? Who knows, right? I don't know where they're going to go with it. All I know is that was something in the news. And to me, when someone says this thing that they pumped a lot of, because remember, Putin put a lot of money behind this. They had a lot of conferences. They traveled the world. They did a lot of stuff around this BRICS promoting this thing. And now it's pretty much done. So the big question to me is, what do they come back with? Do they come back with anything at all? It's sort of admitting defeat, and it's another dollar positive in my mind. It's another thing that goes on the dollar positive side is the quote unquote admission of some degree of failure of the BRICS. Does that help?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
One other aspect of that is this business of Pax Silica that the State Department had rolled out to enforce the technology stack being exported to our allies. Companies are regular, not companies, but countries are being inducted into this, and including some countries from the Mideast. This what people aren't understanding about Pax Silica is not just that the technology stack is rolled out to these people, the infrastructure part of it, the AI part of it, the application layer on top of that, and other applications on top of that. But all of the tokenization aspect that goes along with that, that's also being exported as application layer. And we have to figure, well, what will this mean if like the UAE or Qatar is wrapped into our currency situation? What does that mean? Well, there's a lot of wealth out there. Japan is in this alliance. South Korea is in it. I don't remember the other countries, but there's several, and I'm sure there's going to be more. But when they first roll out this idea that we're going to get all of our allies, our allies, involved with our currency, whatever it turns out to be, tokenization, that basically is going to bury BRICS in the ground forever, because it'll be a block that can't be broken apart at that point. AI, in other words, AI is in a position basically to take over the free world.
Yeah.
So that Pax Silica is pretty big, Patrick. It's Japan, Republic of Korea, South Korea, Singapore, Netherlands, UK, Israel, Australia, Qatar, and UAE. So, and then other contributors, there's other contributors in there, the OECD and some others, but those are the major players. So you're right. I mean, that's that Pax Silica is important to pay attention to.
We should probably do an episode on that. I need to get fully up to speed on that. So that's yeah.
Maybe after this technocracy roundtable, we should do the next one on that.
Yeah,
that sounds good. Well, we're nearing. We've got 4 minutes left, so now might be a good time to kind of wrap things up. But I want to thank you all for joining, and for those listening, we actually do a technocracy roundtable once a month. And this is hosted through Courtney Turner's social media channels, and then we certainly distribute it out as well. And we've done a variety of topics. The last one was on agriculture. We've covered healthcare. We've covered a variety of different topics, and we have the next technocracy roundtable. What is it? Next Wednesday? Is it?
Yep.
The 25th, and we're talking about free speech, and I would say the urgent battle for free speech probably is going to be where that kind of ends up. So I encourage everybody to check that out. And then do you guys want to talk about your book and kind of the book tour that you're on?
Yeah, I think my camera might have gone out, but
nope, I see
you're
it.
on.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, Patrick, you can start, and I'll.
Well, here we are in Austin, Texas, and exactly we're kind of attempting a media tour. It is a little bit ad hoc, but we're together, and we met for the first time in person. That was really exciting. So I know. So
awesome.
we're having fun, and we're having another interview this afternoon and another one tomorrow as well. So
we'll be on. So it'll be live. We'll be on InfoWars on Harrison Smith's show today, 4:00, I believe, Central time. Tomorrow we're on Dan Holloway. So, and yesterday was pre-recorded, but it was with Kurt Metzger. So, yeah.
Oh, great.
We'll have all of that posted as soon as the links are available. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I highly recommend the book, The Final Betrayal. I think everybody should read it, particularly right now. If you want to understand the context of the Epstein files, read this book and then follow actually Patrick and Courtney. But Patrick's been covering this for decades. Go to technocracynews.com. And I point this to everybody, but there is, this isn't actually completely new revelations. What we're seeing is kind of proof of something that many like Patrick and others have been talking about for a long time. So I highly recommend that. Craig, you want to talk about what you're up to and where people can find you?
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to say is, I mean, you guys are just, every one of you are hitting it out of the park with articles. I mean, the other day, Patrick made me think all weekend about a short article he sent through. You know, I was questioning some things. And I mean, it's just, every one of you are writing such great stuff. And I just can't thank you enough for doing that stuff. I mean, I do a show every morning, 8 a.m. on Rumble. For those of you looking for it, you can find it. It's called World of Harmonic Deconstruction. If you do a search on that, you'll find it, World HD, that kind of stuff. And this is what we talk about, the financial side of this, looking at the technocracy. When I first started off, it was really about trying to call out the corruption in the financial markets because nobody else was really doing it. You can go to Fox, you can go to wherever, Bloomberg, whatever. They talk about a lot of the right stuff, but they don't talk about what really goes on underneath the surface. And that was really the intent of it. That plus assessing what is really the dollar, that was really the formation of the show. Now it's actually turning into more of the technocracy because you just see this stuff just becoming so pervasive everywhere. And this tokenization, I just feel like no matter how much time I spend on it, I'm just so far behind, I can't catch up on it, you know? So that's what we try to do. We try to stay as close as we can to the tokenization of this, but I mean, it moves so fast and it's just, you know, that's what we do every day is try to hang on to the caboose.
It's interesting. I did just do a really quick look up on this Pax Silica with all the countries, and each country has a different role. So the United States is the leader and coordinator. Japan is precision manufacturing and advanced tech. South Korea is the semiconductor giants. Singapore is the logistics and the high-tech hub. Netherlands is where the key equipment, they call it lithography, ASML. And the United Kingdom is research, software, and design. Sorry. Israel is cybersecurity and chip design. And then the UAE is energy investment, and Australia is critical minerals mining.
So sorry to cut you off, but we do actually have a hard stop. But I want to thank all three of you for joining. I encourage everyone to check out the Technocracy Roundtable next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And I want to thank Shannon for giving me the opportunity to host the show. Until next time.
Great.
Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment to thank one of my longtime friends, associates, my financial advisor, and a beloved sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show, Don Pullano over at PCM and Associates. Don Pullano, as many of you know, was the very first Shannon Joy Show advertiser almost 12 years ago, and he's been with us ever since. I trust Don Pullano. He manages some of my assets and my retirement fund, and he's offering his services to all of you. He can take clients anywhere in the country and even across the globe over at PCM and Associates. And as you guys know, it is so important today. There's so much volatility and chaos. You need a human being, a person that you trust, and a person that shares your values. And that's Don Pullano at PCM and Associates. So if you are looking for someone to help you manage your retirement or have investment advice, please consider calling Don Pullano over at PCM and Associates. His number, 1-800-536-1368. That's 1-800-536-1368. And of course, you can go to PCMPullano.com. That is PCMPullano.com to learn about all of his services and get in contact with his team. Again, so thankful for Don Pullano at PCM and Associates. And I think that you are really going to appreciate his services. So that number again, 1-800-536-1368 for a financial advisor that you can trust.